I'm John Dickerson.
I'm Maurice Dubois.
Part of the all-new CBS Evening.
This is CBS.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson in New York, where Wall Street took another dive today. The Dow fell roughly 2,200 points, about 5%. The Nasdaq dropped nearly 6%, around 1,000 points, and the S&P 500 slid roughly 6% as well. The second day of the downward trend is, of course, fallout from President Trump's recently announced new tariffs. The 10% on imports from every country goes into effect tomorrow. China retaliated with 34% tariffs on all U.S. goods, igniting fears of a global trade war and potential recession. With me now is Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady. Okay, Kelly, day two of this. How is day two different than day one, if the numbers are big?
It's worse.
Yeah.
In fact, it's significantly worse. So you mentioned that the Dow closed down over 2,000 points. That is the fourth time in history. Now, the Dow keeps going up over time, so 2,000 is not as significant a number this time around as maybe last time around.
But still rarefied territory. It doesn't happen that
rare.
much. Yeah.
A couple more stats for you. This is the worst two-day rout for stocks since March of 2020. Going back to the pandemic, we erased nearly 1 year of gains in the past few weeks in the market. And the Nasdaq is what we call bear market territory. That means when you have lost 20% of the value since its recent high. It entered that territory today. The S&P 500 is entering that territory. Just means investors are feeling very scared. All the sectors were down, and tech really took it on the chin, which we talked about yesterday.
Right.
It hurts your 401k.
That's right. And tech, because they both have component parts coming from overseas, and they have huge markets like Apple, 15 to 20% of their market in China. Speaking of China, what are you seeing in this response from China?
So China slapped 34% retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, and that's not going to make goods more expensive for us here. What that means, it's going to be more expensive for Chinese citizens to buy American goods. Think about the big companies, right? Apple, Nike, Tesla. But what really, I think, was reflected in investors today is they see that as China is determined to fight, and we are heading towards a global trade war. And where you get concerned about that is that's when consumers spend less, prices are higher, and you really saw that in the price of oil, because oil hit its lowest level since April 2021. And you're probably thinking, oh, well, my gas prices are
People are like, hey, that's
this
great.
Is fantastic.
Yes, so explain why oil being low is not the good news one might think it would be.
Energy drives production. When you're manufacturing, when you have lots of activity and your economy is booming, you need oil. The fact that it went down is reflective that investors think we could be heading towards slowing economic growth, and you would need less oil because of less production.
Let me grab that for a second, which is that when you hear the administration talk about what's happening right now, they say, well, this is the market. It's not the real economy. They'll figure things out. What I hear you saying in oil, and correct me if I'm wrong, is businesses that use energy are making choices about what the future looks like. And that is affecting the oil market. And the bet that they're making about the future is that it's not going to be a roaring future full of a lot of economic activity, that it's going to be a less strong economic period. And that's why oil is, the bets are that there's going to be less energy used. So that's not just people trading in the market. That's real businesses making real choices about what the future looks like. Do I have that right?
Well, because oil is traded on a global market. You buy and you sell. So that's exactly right. And the reason is tariffs, because if prices are higher, businesses are going to buy less, people are going to buy less, and therefore you produce less.
Kelly O'Grady walking me through economics, for which I am grateful. We're going to turn now to White House correspondent Weijia Zhang, who is in Florida with the president. Weijia, what was the president up to today while the market took its second dip, and what did he say about it?
Well, John, just a few minutes ago, President Trump returned to his Mar-a-Lago resort after spending the day at his golf club. But he also spent the day very active on social media, trying to convince Americans of what he is saying. He's saying even though the markets are spiraling right now, ultimately they will boom. And he had some pretty direct messages. First, to the investors who might be spooked about pouring more money into the U.S. He said that my policies will never change, and this is a great time to get rich. He also criticized China for those retaliatory tariffs on American exports, saying that Beijing played this wrong. But the president also revealed that when he said he is ready to negotiate, he means it. He said he was on the phone today with the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, and he claims that that leader says Vietnam wants to bring the tariffs down to zero for American goods if they are able to strike a deal. And he said that the two countries will be in touch in the coming days. And then finally, President Trump had a direct message for the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. This is not the first time he has sent this message, but he says to Powell that this is the time right now to cut interest rates. And he said it in all caps, John, which if you have seen any of Trump's posts, you know that's when he really wants to emphasize something, saying cut interest rates, Jerome, and stop playing politics. Now, recently in the Oval Office, I asked President Trump if he thought that the Fed should listen to him, and he said yes. John?
Well, that's so interesting, Leisha, because I believe Kevin Hassett, the top economic advisor to the president, said relatively recently that markets have benefited over history when central bankers are independent of the political forces. So that would put him at odds with the president, who is putting political pressure on Jerome Powell. Can I ask you a question about when the good times are going to roll here? If the White House says that these are the birthing pains, if you will, my expression, not theirs, between the past and the new global trade order that they've been talking about, when's that going to kick in where people can stop feeling the sense of nervousness that all our reporting says they're feeling?
Well, remember, John, just 2 days ago, we were talking about Liberation Day. And in Trump's mind, that is the U.S. being liberated from a reliance on foreign products because we are going to enter a new golden age for American manufacturing. So the question is, when could American manufacturing really get up to speed where we are not relying on so many products from elsewhere? And it's interesting, John, because the White House has been pretty hesitant to attach any kind of time frame to that. But yesterday, President Trump said it would take about 1.5 years or 2 years for manufacturing to get up to speed. That is a long time when you're talking about people who want immediate relief from high prices.
And I mean, not to get basely political here, but of course there are off-year, non-presidential year elections at about that time frame too. So that will be an interesting confluence of events. Weijia Jiang, traveling with the president. Thank you. We were talking about the Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, and let's listen to what he said earlier today.
It is now becoming clear that tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected. And the same is likely to be true of the economic effects, which will include higher inflation and slower growth. The size and duration of these effects remains uncertain. While tariffs are highly likely to generate at least a temporary rise in inflation, it's also possible that the effects could be more persistent.
And we're joined now by CBS News senior business and technology correspondent Jolene Kent. Jolene, any reaction from you to what Chairman Powell there said? And I know you've been paying special attention to small businesses and how they're sorting all of this through. So what are you hearing from them?
Well, the remarks from Chair Powell are sobering. This is something that comes with a chair of the Federal Reserve who's very measured in his response to economic data, very careful about the political environment. So when you're a small business and you're hearing Chair Powell talk about these types of persistent inflation risks, that does not feel good. A lot of small businesses that we've been talking to have already told us, look, we survived the pandemic. We have been facing persistent inflation, and now we're basically, many feel that they're sandbagging ahead of what could be a flood of new challenges. So looking ahead, what can small businesses do? Well, a lot of them say they're going to hold off on hiring. That's likely to affect the labor market writ large. Of course, so many small businesses making up the fabric of our economy, right? You also may see a cut to profits. Orders get slowed down, growth also slowing down. And the issue here is that there's so much desire for certainty. The small businesses were hoping to get that from President Trump this week. They got the opposite, and they are not sure how bad it will get. So they're just bracing for any outcome and scenario. John.
All right, Jolene Kent, thank you so much. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, on your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm John Dickerson.
Welcome in to CBS News 24/7. I'm Juliette Goodrich. You've been watching a CBS News special report on another brutal day on Wall Street. The Dow fell more than 2,200 points as investors react to an escalating trade war. The U.S. hit China with tariffs, and China hit back. So let's take a look at our interactive stock market heat map brought to you by FinViz, showing the top 500 stocks. Red indicating the stock is down. The green you see there in a couple spots means it's up. The box represents market cap. Today, it's a sea of red. So let's bring in CBS News contributor, business contributor Javier David. Javier, thanks for joining us. You were in that conference as Powell was speaking. What was the mood like?
Yeah, the mood was basically the Fed trying to stake out what they feel is their line or their lane, which is price stability, maximum employment, the insistence that they are not going to sort of get involved in policy or political skirmishes. The Fed chairman is very firm that he is watching the tariff war unfold and that he does feel that it's inflationary, but at the same time, he does feel that the central bank can afford to wait. This is a sort of a rerun that played out back in 2018 and 2020 and during the first Trump administration, where the president put an enormous amount of pressure on the Fed chair to cut rates. At that time, the Fed chair was just as reluctant as he is now to respond to that political pressure. And, you know, Powell's a very plain-spoken guy. All the sort of central bank speak aside, he very much wants to be considered independent, and that he is making policy decisions based on data and not on political pressure.
Javier, let's get to some specifics. So if we're talking about these back and forth tariffs with China, what do they mean for products that we use every day? Brands like Amazon, brands like Apple.
Yeah, retail in the crosshairs, autos in the crosshairs, food in the crosshairs. Those are the primary things that you would likely expect to be impacted by tariffs. So if you want a car, you better probably move quick. And keep in mind, cars were already on the pricey side even before the tariff war began. You can expect a lot of those costs to jump significantly. We're seeing a lot in the Dallas area in particular, a lot of movement upward in price in terms of avocados and limes and certain types of foodstuffs. So there are a lot of sort of idiosyncratic reasons why food is expensive right now, and it's about to get a lot more expensive.
So, Javier, President Trump has been saying any short-term pain will be worth bringing manufacturing back to the United States. So if you can, walk us through this thinking and how it might play out for American businesses.
Yeah, I mean, look, the president is trying to basically turn the clock back a bit. He wants to make the manufacturing sector a centerpiece of the U.S. economy. We haven't done that in a while. This economy is 2/3 consumer spending. It's 2/3 services sector. We haven't made things. We haven't manufactured things in a very long time. And so the attempt in and of itself aside, even if he's successful, it's going to take a very long time. So the whole idea is this is a short-term pain for a longer-term gain. And, you know, as an analyst that I follow said yesterday, the president is either going to be very, very right or very, very wrong. There's just no in between here.
All right, Javier David. Javier, thank you.
Sure.
Meantime, President Donald Trump throws TikTok another lifeline. The social media app faced a Saturday deadline to sell or face a nationwide ban. So CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joining us now. Thanks so much for your time. Obviously a busy day today, but let's talk about TikTok and the latest there.
deadline, and there has not been a sell of a portion of it that the administration has been pushing for. And so based on that deadline, it would have gone dark. Of course, we saw that happen for several hours, putting users into a tailspin. But he's offering another 75-day extension because President Trump says he needs more time, essentially, to be able to broker a good deal and work out all the specifics, which we still do not know. So in a post on social media, the president says that he signed an executive order to keep TikTok running for an additional 75 days. They will continue to work in good faith with China, who he says he understands is not very happy about the reciprocal tariffs. So we also know that, TikTok holds a pretty special place in the president's heart because he has been so explicit about how he believes this particular social media platform helped him win the election back in November. And we also can't forget that the reason we're even having this conversation is because he is the first one who called for a ban of TikTok during his first administration because his advisors and he said it was a threat to national security. So this is a complete 180, which is why we are seeing he is giving yet another time period, some grace, if you will, for a deal to be made.
All right, Weijia Jiang. Weijia, thank you. Let's get to some breaking news. A Maryland judge ordered that the man mistakenly deported to an El Salvador prison be returned to the United States by Monday night. Earlier today, Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife spoke after the rally saying thank you to everyone who supported her husband.
I want to say thank you to everyone that has helped us, that has supported us in fighting this, and we will continue fighting for Kilmar, for my husband.
CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen joining us live now. Jake, what are your key takeaways from this hearing?
Well, there were a couple. The first of which is that by midnight on Monday, this man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, will need to be returned back into the United States. This is the first time of all of these back and forths over these students who have been deported, or in the Venezuelan migrant case that we've been covering, where there's been talk of potentially returning people from this El Salvadoran supermax prison. This time, a judge in Maryland, just up the road from here, has ordered his return. She found that during the hearing today, which basically had no opposition from the government, she found that there was definitely a proven lack of law enforcement basis to even have detained him in the first place. The government provided no documentation that there was a new active warrant to deport him again. She said that any claims of the government that he was part of MS